Hi there, this is Ihsahn, and you're listening to Sonic Perspectives.
Hello and welcome to another interview with Sonic Perspectives. I'm Samantha Buckman, and today I have the pleasure of being joined with one of metal's most esteemed artists, none other than Ihsahn. And we're here today to talk about Ihsahn's upcoming album, the self-titled double album that is coming out on February 16th. So, how does it feel to be putting out not just one full-length album, but a double album after what has it been, 6 years since your last one?
Yeah, it feels great. I'm excited to finally have it out there because if I'm honest, it's been done for quite a while, but given all the layers and that goes went into this, it's taken some time to get everything prepared for a full release. So yeah, it's uh, it's a big chunk of work that went into it, and I'm very excited. I'm very proud to to finally present it.
I'm sure. Last year was quite a busy year for you. You released the EP Fascination Street Sessions along with the um, course with Jens Bogren, as well as going on tour with Emperor in North America for the first time in 10 years. How did you find the time to make this album?
It is quite the pandemic project, So prior to the pandemic, I did record a couple of other EPs. One where I focused on just the kind of the black metal aspect of what I do, although with the brass section, and called Telemark, and I sang in Norwegian, and I did an EP uh, opposite of that, which was almost like indie pop music and everything that I didn't know how to do. And then later, then I started doing this album, writing for this full length, and it was kind of in between that I did the Fascination Street session. So I wrote all the material and got to some of the arrangement phases, and then kind of took a break from that to do the Fascination Street thing and write those songs, and then coming back to it. So it's been um, usually I do not appreciate, putting breaks in project. I like to stay focused, but that's just not the way of the world anymore. And I think for this particular album, I think it was actually healthy that I got some necessary breaks to kind of because it's to keep some level of objectivity.
Absolutely. And something that's really special about this album is that it is a self-titled album, and that's a statement for any artist to make. What made this album the right one?
Well, I think my label thought that it was a bigger deal than I thought because usually, self-titled albums are often the first one or somewhere down the line. And there's really just two quite mundane reasons for you know going with a self-titled album this time. And one was it was since it's two versions and there are two different storylines going. There's all these kind of complex layers of everything that went into it. It was very hard to find a title that would kind of capture all of that. And secondly, even though it's multi-layered and all this, at the heart of it, it's very core elements. So if you were to, draw a straight line from the beginning of my career until now, like the reoccurring elements would be, a black metal expression and orchestral stuff. And at the heart of this, it's just like a standard metal band and a standard symphony orchestra. That that's what it is. And even the storyline is very classical, Greek inspired, Joseph Campbell style hero's journey, very archetypical characters, and just essentially a lot of this, in spite of me having done a lot of different experiments, like the two EPs I described, I've been doing gone a bit in one direction and one a bit in the other. This is very down the middle of what I've been doing musically. So I thought this time is as good as any to do like a self-titled.
Absolutely. At what point in the creative process did you decide you did want to make it two albums with the orchestral version and the metal version?
At the very beginning, before I wrote any music. So that was part of the project that literally because I love soundtracks and all that, and it has been since the beginning. And I just want to try to kind of write an orchestral arrangement that would support the metal production, but also arrange it in such a way that it will also function independently. So that was kind of the challenge. And to be so literally, there's the same music on both albums, and it's also the same orchestral arrangements as goes into the full production album. But of course, it there's a different dynamic and emotional character to the orchestral version than the full metal one. So as a simple example, like the first single, Pilgrimage to Oblivion, is probably one of the hardest songs on the album. Like starts off with blast beats and screaming and distorted guitars in like full speed, and the equivalent orchestral version starts off like whispery, quiet tremolo cellos. It's the same music, So that was that was the goal, and so I literally wrote the entire album just with a piano short score, like all the music just with a piano sound, and then arranged it for the different ensembles afterwards.
You've mentioned how important piano is as an instrument to you, as one of your very first inspirations. What kind of classical artists or classical work, especially with the piano, were you inspired by for this album?
Oh no, no, guys, I'm a horrible piano player. I did start out on the piano when I was like 6, and took lessons. Horrible student, but I loved playing, but I never became any good at it. And by the time I was 10, I got my first electric guitar, and if it was bad beforehand, my piano playing went downhill from there. But of course, I'm familiar with it as a compositional tool. It's a very organized way of writing. At the heart of my studio, I have this huge controller, keyboard controller where I do everything. But I like as a pianist, I could never do anything proper. So it's more like a tool, and also my love of orchestral music and wanting to do orchestral arrangements and everything. The gateway to that for me was just through horror movie soundtracks. So like the biggest influences for me going into this album is like the old school Jerry Goldsmith, John Williams, Bernard Herrmann, soundtracks. And that, but then you listen to John Williams like for Star Wars, the Imperial March, and then someone said like, have you heard Gustav Holst, The Planets? And then you hear Mars, The Bringer of War, and then it's like, aha, John Williams has some influences going back, and then it kind of snowballs from there. But yeah, I'm self-taught. I have no musical education, so just I don't want to intellectualize this too much. It's like just my humble approach to this.
Absolutely. And grabbing onto that horror soundtrack thread, I'm going to jump to the music videos, particularly the last two music videos um, that were released. Um, they create their own horror movie of sorts, this very dark, conceptual series of videos. How did you come up with the concept for these music videos, and how are you involved in creating them?
Well, I since I wanted this album to have this kind of cinematic, layer to them. This is the first album that I actually wrote like a synopsis for a novel, like a storyline, and then all the lyrics, follow that narrative and create kind of scenes throughout the album. So it's a very traditional conceptual album like that. And when it came to do the music videos, it made sense to try to illustrate that story, in the music videos, and it's all very abstract. And as I said, it's not really important for me to people to get my story and figure it out or anything, but hopefully it creates an experience of cohesion, and maybe people interpret it in a different way and create their own story and their own interpretations of what it is, which is great. And also there are three music videos that has been released now with 3 singles, and they kind of form, try to illustrate the entire story, but like abstractly. And in parallel, I'm releasing the orchestral version of these singles, and I believe there's only 2 of them released as yet, but they're also accompanying kind of animations for the orchestral version, which follows a parallel story. Oh, Siri is blending in my phone. No, it's so there are really 2 stories to this, and each kind of series of videos for follow the 2 storylines. So, but I mean, you said it's the dual album release and everything, and it's funny because it's 2024. With people's general attention span, I've been doing everything wrong. Like 2 parallel stories, 2 parallel albums, accompanying music videos that are tied together is like demanding a lot, from listeners. But for those interested, there's something to dig deeper into, hopefully. And the reason for doing that is just like that's the kind of albums that I grew up on and loving. The conceptual stuff where, you could read all the liner notes in the vinyl and like really create a relationship to the music and try to figure it out. And it was exciting and it sparked the imagination.
I mean, that's how I've felt listening to the album so far. I just feel like there's entire worlds that I still have yet to discover within the music, but I definitely have some questions about the imagery that I've noticed across the album and its associated videos and merchandise. One thing that
Mhm.
I've noticed is the recurring imagery of deer. The first track translates roughly to deer hunter. There is the deer that appears in the music video, and of course, the album cover features a very large set of antlers. So, what does the deer represent to you, and how does it tie into the story?
I mean, it's such a versatile symbolism, and there's just also a very classic symbol, and there are a lot of references to Greek mythology and Apollo and Dionysus in the lyrics. There's all very, very classical archetypes, and for me, the deer, it's the whole nature aspect. It's innocence, but the stag is also like the strength and pride, and the horns for me is like always been like a symbol, like the expansion of the mind. So there's so much stuff that goes into it, and again, it sparks the imagination, and I found it very inspiring to use as like a main kind of symbolic uh, representation through this. Even the main guitar I use for the recording even has a deer inlay on the 12th fret.
No way. That's very poetic.
Thank you.
Um, And when it comes to the lyrics, I'm not going to ask you to divulge the whole story because there's no fun in that. Um, but I also noticed some lyrical themes, and maybe it's just me, and maybe it's just a little silly, but I noticed in the song Hubris and Blue Devils, in one of the verses, the lyrics reference both an antagonist and the adversary. Does this relate in any way to your first album on purpose?
uh, there might be some, what can I say, some Easter egg references, and I'll admit it's been deliberate to kind of uh, put small lyrical, things in there, and without revealing too much, there are some of the orchestral kind of textures and embellishment are like just maybe there can be violin stuff, like a small violin theme or something that is actually a heavy 8 string theme on the previous record. Just like not part of the composition, but just like embellishments. So I've had a bit of fun, you know, baking in just these small elements, you know. So quite well spotted.
I was very excited when I heard that. And it does seem like such a culmination of the work you've done so far. You mentioned a few times now that the EPs, Telemark and Pharos, really taught you something, especially Pharos, bringing in that pop rock influence. And how did that lend itself to writing this album? What did you learn and how have you applied it since?
Well, I think those two EPs were initially, because they were planned and recorded prior to the pandemic, and the whole idea was because you know I've been doing elements of both those EPs throughout my entire career, but this time I kind of distilled out the extreme element, and I then distilled out the more progressive elements. And the idea was actually to follow up with separate tours where I would do the extreme stuff on one tour and then do only the experimental stuff on the second. And I think, and the reason they were EPs was that I thought that the thematics of both were too kind of distilled and limited to be a full album, but they lent themselves to this kind of short format. But for this full album again, so this is like a contrary response to doing those like smaller projects that were very distilled, to try to go very down the center, as I said. So but of course it's compositionally and technically you learn something all the time. So but it's hard to say how they influence, but it influenced me to go very down the center.
And as you've been these last few years, you've come to get more involved in production, like with Ibaraki and with your own projects. And how has that influenced how you approach this album? And especially since when it came to mixing the album, you worked on the metal version with Jens Bogren, who you've worked with many times before, but you worked with Joel Dollie on the orchestral version. What was it like working with these two different people on these two different sides of the album?
Uh, if you give me 1 second, I'll respond to that because I'm afraid my battery is running out. So I'll just plug in so we don't lose anything. Excuse me 1 second. Very, very sorry. Because I don't want to lose connection. Yeah, no, it's working with Jens it has of course been a huge privilege, and there's a reason I've been kept coming back to working with him and his team, because yeah, it's literally, it always worked, and he always understands where I'm going. My recordings, he's always able to mix them in such a way that it comes back much better than I could have hoped for. And he did an amazing job, I think, keeping the metal elements, big and violent in a sense, because it's a lot of without criticizing anyone else, but like I felt sometimes that when a lot of orchestral metal music, it's not like it hasn't been done before, but it's almost like trying to fit too large thing into one small box, because the density of the metal production, and then the density of like a big orchestra, it's kind of hard to not have to make both smaller to make it fit into the spectrum of an audio stereo file. But Jens managed to balance the two beautifully, I think. But for the orchestral version, I thought I wanted something classic sounding, and I was quite determined to try and find someone who had that experience. And Joel Dollie has been he's been even given his own courses on how to mix like orchestral mock-ups or like hybrid of samples and real orchestra for game and movies and everything. So and the main library that I used for recording and programming this was the Spitfire Audio BBC Symphony Orchestra Pro, and he coincidentally, when I got in touch with him, he had actually been doing mixing for some of the Spitfire Audio demos for that library in particular. So he kind of knew all the mic positions and everything. So it was perfect. And yeah, he also did an amazing job kind of bringing the orchestrations to life and really, not having it like this hyped kind of metal produced. I wanted it to sound like more like a traditional old school soundtrack than something, modern. And he really pulled it off.
Absolutely. It is amazing how the music is the same across both, but the feeling is so different. It is absolutely beautiful to behold.
Oh,
But
thank you.
I'll I'll pivot again into some of the people that you worked with on this
Mhm.
project in terms of the music. So you've worked with your longtime drummer, but this time, as you did on your last full length, you incorporated your son on percussion. And this isn't the first time you've involved your family in your music. At what point do you start to bring your family in, and how do they get to contribute?
Well, it's all very practical because I mean, for this album, I brought in both Tobiases. I mean, I have Tobias Örnes and Tobias Solbach. They're two amazing drummers, and they've been doing live shows with me forever, and amazing drummers. So I with this album, I really just want to play into each of their strengths and kind of and they were both there in the studio at the same time, like so they could really bounce off ideas like drummer style stuff off each other, which was really great. And my son is a drummer, and I had two of the greatest, Norwegian drummers in the studio. Of course, he would be there, you know. And then when it was time to do the percussion parts, it was also from a sonic perspective, it was really cool to we aligned them up in a triangle, with stereo mics in a big studio space, and had them do all the kind of embellishments and everything as a trio, and then you get that full, to get that full room thing rather than just overdubbing, So and it's really cool that he could be part of that, and he's been before. And our daughter has been, doing voices and stuff in the past. Of course, my wife has been singing. She is my, creative sparring partner for feedback for everything that I do. Yeah, I've worked a lot with my brother-in-law, Einar Solberg from Lepros, so we've been kind of doing stuff for each other. So it's all, you know, so much of the family is just doing this for a living. This and our kids are kind of used to that. So they're just like, you bring them in, and my son is contributing, doing session work for my daughter's music, and yeah, they're all environmentally damaged.
I mean, it is just fantastic, though, that you do have such a strong family and community that can support you in this, creative process.
Yeah, it's great, and it's just, I mean, I think it's just a matter of if you grow up with parents or family who do something in particular, if that's, you know, can be anything, but it's like if it's associated with something nice and great experiences, that it's natural that kids want to share that. And I'm very happy that they're both, you know, pursuing, careers in music, and in a very natural way. I think, the I think for a lot of people who do not come from that background, like making albums and touring the world seems like very, foreign things. But for them, it's just like it's what people do, you know. And then you take kind of the mystery away from it and can focus on the actual, you know, uh, real relationship to the music and the creation of music. So
That's so wonderful. And when it does come to touring, how do you think that you're going to be able to bring such a massive concept like this album to the live stage one day? What are you most excited about, and what are some difficulties that you anticipate?
Well, I haven't really. I mean, since because of the way it's written, I think even though the production now is the metal elements with the orchestra, I think uh, depending on how I saw this, but literally since I wrote the whole thing, as one musical piece and then kind of arranged it for all these instruments, whether they were traditional metal or orchestra, there's really not much that the orchestra plays that the guitars don't play. So it's literally just doublings of the same music. So even if you stripped all the orchestral things away, the songs would be the same, if that makes sense. It would just be a different, but I think I will be setting this up to have that support of the orchestral elements on tracks. Um, uh, but I think in the live environment, that the guitar driven side of things will be the dominant, if that makes sense. And of course, I've gotten that question a lot, whether I want to do this with a full orchestra, and of course, I would love nothing more. But I'm very practical in that sense that uh, if I were to do something like that, it would have to make sense that it would actually be better, and something that really sounds great. But and I've checked, and the just to get the rehearsals needed, we're talking about like a £100,000 or something. Like yeah, $100,000 just to get started, to get the proper orchestra. And there's all these ideas of like maybe bring a string section or whatever, which would be nice, but it was like a bit gimmicky. It's like, oh, it looks like something's very serious, but it's not actually making a difference, you know. So I'm practical like that. So it's going to be um, a very uh, rock and metal oriented show. But I'm very excited to bring this to the stage because I think the energy of the songs will lend itself well to a live environment.
Absolutely. They're just so fun and they're so dynamic. Especially the singles, they just have so much fire to them. It would be fantastic to see them live one day. So I look
I hope
forward to
so.
seeing how you pull that off. And if you had to choose one thing from the album that you are most proud of, what would it be?
Um, I just I think it's just not one particular thing, but just how I managed to integrate everything. Because I mean, writing orchestral stuff in its own is like not super, difficult, and metal stuff I've been doing forever. But like trying to make those fit in that way, and with leitmotifs and reoccurring things, and it's such a huge puzzle. So probably the one thing, the most gratifying thing for me about the album was that I got the experience at, I'm closing in on 50, and I've been doing this for over 3 decades, and to be so excited about making an album and learning so much in the process, even at this stage in my career, to have so much added to my vocabulary and my toolbox. And yeah, I'm just even more excited to do the next album now. That's probably the best thing about it.
So there's no slowing down. You're going right into looking at another album already.
Yeah, I've been uh, fiddling with some ideas, but there's a lot of touring to be done first.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much,
All
and thank you so
right.
much for the support.
Well, thank you. Thank you for tuning in to another interview with Sonic Perspectives. You just heard an interview with Ihsahn. Be sure to look out for his new self-titled album, due out on February 16th. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I always appreciate the time that you put aside for interviews and interacting with press and fans. it's just a very special opportunity, and I'm very grateful.
Thank you so much. Likewise, likewise.
Well, you have a fantastic evening and take care.
You too. You too. Take care. Bye bye.